Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. You're watching another edition of Break the Fake, where we debunk fake news and combat false narratives. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and let's get rolling. Now let's talk about the annual theater of absurd, Putin's direct line with the people. A PR masterpiece of modern autocracy where the questions are staged, the answers rehearsed, and everyone pretends that they don't see the strings. Now, this year's edition was no exception. The star of the show, the infamous Orishnik missile, now with bonus nuclear capabilities. When asked about this supposed marvel of Russian engineering, Putin delivered his signature cocktail of bravado and paranoia. According to the Russian president, no defense system on Earth, Patriot, THAAD, or anything else the West can cook up stands a chance against his shiny new toy. Naturally, he couldn't resist taking a jab at American taxpayers, suggesting that they're being robbed blind to fund Ukraine's defense. A bold statement from a guy funneling billions into a military-industrial complex while vast swaths of his country still rely on outhouses for basic sanitary needs.
Наших ребят на Украине попросим, чтобы они нам, может, подсказали, какие-то там есть современные, ценные для нас тоже решения. Когда я говорю наших ребят, говорю без иронии, нам есть с кем разговаривать на Украине. И там много наших ребят, которые тоже вместе с нами мечтают о том, чтобы избавить свою страну от неонацистского режима. Но есть и другие средства поражения. Это системы противоракетной обороны, о которой много-много говорили, много дискутировали. И у нас мы упрашивали когда-то американцев не разворачивать эту систему, чтобы нам не нужно было создавать систему преодоления. В конце концов, мы это сделали. Помните, «Авангард» появился у нас, планирующий блок, который не летит по вот такой вот траектории, а стелется по земле, не выходит там в космос, не баллистическая ракета и так далее. Мы много чего сделали для преодоления ПРО.
And let's not forget about his flex about Poland and Romania's air defense systems. Putin smugly pointed out that their systems can only intercept missiles with a range of 500 kilometers, while their Orishnik boasts a whopping 5,500 kilometers. Sure, Vlad, we're all very impressed, but maybe focus less on missile trajectories and more on the trajectory of your economy, which is currently in freefall. Now, the ironic part? Putin's claim that the West gets nothing in return for supporting Ukraine, coming from a man whose entire regime is a black hole of corruption, siphoning off resources to fund his imperial fantasies. But hey, if your only achievement are fear-mongering and warmongering, you might as well lean in hard. In the end, this wasn't a dialogue with the people. It was a monologue for the international audience. A sad attempt to flex power while the rest of the world rolls eyes. Now, keep whacking that nuclear stick, Vlad. One day, someone might actually take it seriously. Putin's annual direct line is a Soviet-style spectacle where adoration for the supreme leader is mandatory, even for the youngest citizens. Now, this year's installment brought the usual mix of performative loyalty and cringe-worthy propaganda, with the added bonus of preschoolers in Dagestan being roped in as the captive audience. Yep, you read that right. Toddlers watching the grand spectacle of their fearless leader. No doubt thrills to miss their nap time for such an important event. Imagine the scene. Wide-eyed children staring at a screen, probably wondering why this balding man is rambling about missiles and the West's moral decay instead of letting them watch cartoons. But hey, indoctrination waits for no one, especially not in a country where loving the head honcho is part of the curriculum. Forget ABCs and playtime, these kids are getting a crash course in the fine art of idol worship.
Воюют в Курской области, выбивает противника с нашей территории. Ну, конечно, нет.
The audience wasn't limited to preschoolers, though. Enter the usual suspects. Ksenia Sobchak playing the role of the critical journalist, vlogger Vlad Bugmaga adding a sprinkle of youth appeal, and Konstantin Ernst, the puppet master of Russian state television, smugly soaking up the pageantry. It's a who's who of regime loyalists pretending that this isn't the most scripted event of the year.
Вопросами будем следить по ходу дискуссии, какой из них заметить. Мне кажется, важное событие, много журналистов, есть возможность в таком долгом формате узнать, о чем думает президент. Мне кажется, что это интересно.
The questions? Carefully curated softball pitches designed to make Putin look like a benevolent genius. The answers? Predictable. Boasts about missiles, geopolitical chest thumping, and vague promises to fix issues he's been ignoring for decades. But the real star wasn't Putin or his answers. They were overshadowed by the absurdity of the whole setup, a room full of sycophants, and even a kindergarten audience to cheer on the charade. So, what's next? Perhaps next year they'll broadcast it in maternity wards, ensuring that even newborns get their first dose of Putin worship. After all, no age is too young to start pledging allegiance to the man who spent over 2 decades turning Russia into his personal fiefdom. The Kremlin's finest propagandists are at it again, spinning tales so absurd that they could outdo a poorly written soap opera. The latest drama? The demise of Chemical Igor, the war criminal responsible for chemical attacks in Ukraine, who met his end in the heart of Moscow. Naturally, instead of confronting the glaring incompetence of their security services, the regime has chosen to play its favorite game, the Blame Olympics. First up to be accused, Ukraine. Barely an hour after the explosion, state media trotted out a conveniently confessing patsy, claiming to have orchestrated the assassination for Ukrainian intelligence. The poor man looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, probably wishing he'd chosen a less hazardous career than forced Kremlin scapegoat. But wait, enter Vladimir Solovyov, Russia's favorite fire-breathing propagandist with a plot twist nobody asked for. Forget Ukraine, he thundered. This has British meddling written all over it. Yes, according to Solovyov, it's the Brits who mastermind this daring act, because of course nothing screams MI6 like a scooter bomb in downtown Moscow.
Феноменальный человек, вот, потрясающей скромности, обаяния. При этом я говорил сегодня с женой Игоря Анатольевича, как-то язык не поворачивается говорить вдовой. Жена, конечно, человек с железным характером, с железной волей. То есть ни слезинки. Вот. Начальник войск РХБЗ вел очень скромный образ жизни.
The irony is rich. The same regime that boasts about its unbreakable security apparatus can't even keep its own generals alive in the capital. And now, its propaganda machine is in a frenzy, flailing between narratives like a headless chicken. Was it Ukraine? Was it UK? Or maybe, just maybe, it's the Kremlin's own house of cards crumbling under the weight of paranoia and corruption. But in a typical Solovyov fashion, he skipped over any logical explanation to go straight for maximum hysteria. Perhaps next week he'll accuse Martians of colluding with NATO. Meanwhile, the rest of the world watches with a mix of amusement and expiration as Russia's propaganda clowns fumble to patch the sinking ship of lies. Truly, the Kremlin circus never disappoints. And with that, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.